I would like to go ahead and introduce our first speaker.
Let's go.
Yeah. So he is an archaeologist who's been exploring ancient megalithic sites around the world for over 15 years. He has a specific interest in the perplexing, elongated-headed people of ancient cultures depicted in ancient artworks. So today, he'll be sharing his research into the evidence that ancient cultures had achieved high technology. And I'm very interested in this. So I'm super pleased to bring in the amazing Brien Foerster.
Greetings
hello,
to
Brien.
all. Oh, hello. Greetings to all of you.
How are you, Brien? And where are you tuning in from?
I'm on the coast of Peru.
Amazing, amazing.
Wow.
Thank you so much for joining us. What a pleasure. I'm a huge fan of your work and your research, and I can't wait to see what you put together for us today.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
me
you.
too. All right. Well, we're going to let you take it away.
Okay, thank you. Well, greetings, everyone. What you're looking at is the cover of one of my 37 books. This one is called Aftershock, the Ancient Cataclysm that Erased Human History. And what we know now from scientific evidence is that between 13,000 and 12,000 years ago, there were a series of cataclysms that would have destroyed any advanced civilization that we know of or possibly don't know anything about. And so what we're going to do is go through a series of sites around the world that I have explored personally. We're going to see evidence of advanced technology that clearly existed before civilization that we recognize in general. And so let's just go ahead with that. So we all know the story of the flood, but there are at least 200, if not 400 distinct cultures that have recorded either written or orally about a series of cataclysms that destroyed their world, whether their world was simply a little island or a big chunk of a continent. And what probably happened was something came into our solar system that was devastating. It could have been a comet or a series of comets, possibly asteroids, energy from the center of our galaxy or solar system, or all of the above. So this, of course, is Plato, and Plato talked about Atlantis. And Atlantis, according to Solon, who was his ancestor, that he learned about from ancient Egyptians, was at least a city, if not a larger landmass, that was destroyed very rapidly, approximately 12,700 years ago. And so this is how some people depict the city of Atlantis, that it was a series of rings with water channels as well. And curiously enough, there is this, which is called the Schis structure, located in Africa in Mauritania. And it has a lot of the characteristics that would describe or would be descriptive of something similar. I know people who have personally been to the Schis structure, and unfortunately there is no evidence of advanced ancient buildings or dwellings there at present time, but it's one of the possible candidates for the lost city of Atlantis. Also, it's curious that our planet is 23.5 degrees off being perfectly vertical, and you would think in a perfect universe that our planet would be perfectly vertical, but it could be that a series of cataclysmic events knocked our planet off from being vertical and now is presently at 23.5 degrees. Also, quite recently, an asteroid was found in Greenland under the ice that was about a mile long, made of nickel iron, and would have had the explosive capacity of about 50 million Hiroshima bombs. And this is exactly where that was found, at a site called Hiawatha Crater. And interestingly enough, if you look at the bottom right-hand side, it says that there was a spike in platinum about 12,900 years ago at this location. And so, again, this could be the possible site of the legendary Atlantis. And this is more specifically a close-up of where this location is. And the site is 31 kilometers across, which matches the description of the city of Atlantis according to Plato. Also, between 13,000 and 12,000 years ago, about 120 species of North American megafauna disappeared off the surface of the earth. And most people, or most academics, believe it was done by early Native American people. But when you look at the scale or the size of these animals, the fact that there were millions of them, it's highly unlikely that they would have been wiped out by native people. It's more likely that the series of cataclysmic events over the course of 1,000 years wiped them off the surface of our earth. And that includes woolly mammoths that have been found in Siberia with food still in their mouths, as if they had been flash frozen. Also, these are the locations of some early peoples who lived prior to the end of the last ice age in different locations around the world and are no longer with us. A great book was written by authors Allen and Dallaire called Cataclysm, Compelling Evidence of a Cosmic Catastrophe in 9500 BC, or 11,500 years ago, approximately. And their work was taken up by author Barbara Hann Clow, who, according to her Cherokee grandfather, as well as other work that she has done, our planet went through a series of what she calls catastrophobia, whereby, again, between 12 and 13,000 years ago, a series of cataclysmic events happened that caused the few survivors to find shelter, probably in caves and other underground dwellings. And this would be what we call the so-called caveman period. Not that it was all throughout our history, but more specifically a certain span of time where people retreated underground or in caves in order to survive, afraid that another series of cataclysmic events would strike again. Also, Dr. Paul Laviolette, who's an American physicist, has a theory called the cosmic superwave, whereby he believes that the black hole in the center of our galaxy every 13,000 years erupts with energy. The standard idea is that a black hole will simply continue to fill up with energy, but according to him, every 13,000 years, it actually fills up and then has to erupt energy. And this would cause an energy field to go across the galactic plane, destroying or damaging almost everything in its path. And also the work of Dr. Robert Schoch, who is an American geologist. He believes that every 13,000 years there are solar outbursts from our sun that strike different points on the planet, vaporizing any life form in existence at that time, and that this last occurred between 12 and 13,000 years ago. So this culminated in my writing of this book, Aftershock. And the only evidence we have of very advanced ancient civilizations are the stonework left behind. We're talking almost perfect precision that could not have been done by the cultures attributed to them. For example, the Inca. This is a site called Rachi, which is located outside of Cusco, Peru, and you can notice that about 4/5, all of the upper area is adobe mud brick construction. And so that would be from the Inca time period, because when the Spanish arrived, they had a tendency of destroying or damaging most of the Inca structures they encountered. And when we get closer, you can see this megalithic, perfectly fitting stonework at the base. And so that was well beyond the capacity of a Bronze Age culture such as the Inca. So this is pre-Inca. This is definite evidence of an advanced civilization having existed in the very distant past. Also outside of Cusco, you see this wall. On the left-hand side, you see megalithic aspects, as in very large stones, fitting together almost perfectly. And then on top and to the side, much cruder work. And the cruder work was either done by the Wadi culture, who preceded the Inca, or the Inca themselves. So this is another example of megalithic construction that the Inca encountered and then built on top of. Also in the city of Cusco, this wall, what you see on the right-hand side, absolute perfect precision, fitting together a very hard basalt stone. And on the left-hand side, repair work done during Inca times. And then after that, above where you see the white area, that is the Spanish colonial time period. Also, the city of Cusco, this is the first topographical map made by the Spanish when they entered Cusco. You see thick walls and thin walls. The thick walls are the megalithic ones, and the thin walls are the Inca ones. This is prior to the time of much actual Spanish colonial construction. Also, we have polygonal construction. You see every stone is a different shape and size, and they interlock almost perfectly. This is not a logical Western way of building things. And the stone, again, is granite, much harder than could have been worked by the Bronze Age technology of the Inca people. And here we see the polygonal work at the bottom, and again, right above it, Inca repair work. Also the site of Sacsayhuaman, which is above the city of Cusco. Some of the stones in this massive wall weigh up to 125 tons and were moved from a quarry a minimum of 3 miles away. Now, this is one of the last large Inca constructions ever done in the 16th century. It was a palace for one of the high Inca. You can see that it's not very well made. So when we contrast this with that, you can see clearly that the Inca did not have the capacity of doing the megalithic precision fitting work. They simply discovered that stuff when they moved into the city of Cusco about 1,000 years ago and adopted the structures. Now, in the Sacred Valley of Peru, we have the site of Ollantaytambo. This is a very large Inca time period construction of stacking stones on top of one another with adobe clay used as a kind of mortar or cement. But in the same location, we have the remains of this massive wall. These stones weigh on average 60 tons and were moved from a quarry across the valley on top of the volcanic mountain you see on the left-hand side. And here again at Ollantaytambo, we can see repair work done by the Inca. That's the smaller stones on top, built on top of the megalithic work that you see at the bottom. Now, Machu Picchu. At Machu Picchu, again, we see two forms of construction. On the left, quite crude, which is about 90% of what Machu Picchu looks like. And then on the right-hand side, almost perfectly fitting construction. So the Inca discovered the ancient site of Machu Picchu and built a city around its megalithic core. Here again at Machu Picchu, you see the rough work on top compared to the megalithic work on the bottom. And another location at Machu Picchu, the right-hand side of this structure sunk into the ground about 2 feet. This would have been prior to Inca times, because if this 9 to 9.5 earthquake had happened during Inca times, the whole city would have been obliterated. So this is another example of inheritance. Now here at a site called Sayhuite, we see a giant stone that is snapped into 2 pieces. This again is likely an example of the cataclysmic activity, and you see the fine precision work that was done on this huge piece of hard andesite stone. Now we're at Tiwanaku in Bolivia. And the stone for Tiwanaku came from 2 quarries. One is a red sandstone quarry about 8 miles away, and the other is from this site called Cerro Capia to the northeast. That's where the gray andesite stone comes from. And again, we have incredible precision work done, almost laser perfect, which could not have been done by the Tiwanaku culture, who existed between 2,000 and 1,000 years ago. And they, again, were barely Bronze Age level of technology. This would be 21st century technology. So obviously, a lost advanced civilization. And they've only done about 2 feet of excavation underneath. Ground penetrating radar has been used, and they've discovered there are massive chambers underneath this site. This shows you an example of the incredible precision at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku. And the various different shapes and incredible precision. Also, we find magnetic anomalies here, which were probably part of the actual construction process. This means a lot of variance in magnetism at this site, which is quite curious, and only with the andesite gray stone. And the famous Gate of the Sun, which was broken in half, probably during the time of the cataclysms, 12 to 13,000 years ago. This is a drawing from Spanish colonial times of the showing that the break was done a long time ago. Now, these supposedly are the tools that archaeologists believe were responsible for all of this work, and that, of course, is quite silly. We're now in Egypt, and you see the difference between these 2 sarcophagi. The one on the right is from about the 4th dynasty, and the one on the left is much, much older. It's pre-dynastic, so that gives us clear evidence that there was an advanced civilization that existed prior to the times of the dynastic people. Also, you see no hieroglyphics on the one on the left-hand side, simply utilitarian. And inside the Cairo Museum, we see a massive saw cut here. And when we move to this one, there were 2 circular saws about 6 feet in diameter, responsible for attempting to cut the top of this box off. This gives us clear evidence of lost ancient high technology with a minimum of diamond level technology. Also, this curious object called the Schis Disk. It looks like it was part of a machine. It's actually described by Egyptologists as being a lotus bowl, but it clearly looks functional and was done by a very advanced culture. That's a side profile view of it. Also, there were found at the site called Saqqara 30,000 to 40,000 precision-made hard stone vessels, plates, bowls, etc., such as these, which they themselves label as being pre-dynastic. So this could only be achieved using a lathe, and lathes were not invented until probably somewhere around the 16th century AD. So this again shows us examples of advanced technology that must have existed a long time ago. Here's an example of another one. We also see tube drills in very hard granite stone in the Cairo Museum, many examples. And tube drill technology was not invented until the 1860s AD in the United States of America. So this gives us another hint at advanced ancient technology. The Great Pyramid, which everyone knows, composed of 2.5 million multi-ton blocks. It could not have been done during the timeline stated by Egyptologists. So this probably, or this was an inheritance by the dynastic Egyptians of something more advanced. And if you didn't know, the Great Pyramid actually has 8 sides. There's a slight depression on each of the 4 main sides. Also, we still have evidence of some of the casing stone existing at the bottom of the Great Pyramid, made of pure calcium carbonate called Tura limestone. And there is an advanced underground system underneath the Giza Plateau that goes for many miles north, south, east, and west. This is access here to part of that system, locked, of course, away from the prying eyes of the public. Also here you see a massive shaft out of bounds from where most tourists are allowed to go. This goes down into the earth, into the bedrock, and connects with a series of tunnels. We also see lots of evidence of ancient saw marks in Egypt. And the obelisks. It's quite likely that the Great Pyramid system, of which there are 8 original pyramids, were energetic structure that were transmitting energy at the time of their completion, and that energy was sent to the obelisks, because the obelisks each were made from one piece of very hard granite, which could not have been achieved by the dynastic people, but again were an inheritance. And these obelisks were in very strategic locations, such as Karnak. As well, of course, we know the Sphinx, the massive temple heavily eroded in front of the Sphinx. That is how the Sphinx was constructed. Giant, massive, multi-ton blocks were cut from the bedrock and moved in front to create the Sphinx temple. If you look at the weathering, the horizontal weathering, you can see that that's very extensive and would be thousands upon thousands of years old. Also, the weathering of the body of the Sphinx is much more than the head, so it's clear that the head was recarved at least once. This is where we see vertical weathering in the Sphinx enclosure. And so vertical weathering means precipitation, which means extensive rainfall. And that, again, according to Robert Schoch and 200 other geologists, happened between 10 and 12,000 years ago at a minimum. Here we have the front paws of the Sphinx and the wooden planks you see where the man with the hat is standing. That's actually the entrance to the underground system, and that is where the so-called Hall of Records is located, hidden away from the public. Also near the back of the Sphinx, there is a grate that you can pull out, and when you look inside, there is a ladder that goes down inside the Sphinx. So the Sphinx itself is hollow and connects with this ancient tunnel system. Then we have the bent pyramid. And the bent pyramid probably was not a mistake made by the original Egyptians who built it. So that's what the standard story is, that they built half of it and then figured out that the angle was wrong. It's more likely that it was built as a giant energetic device, and its design was on purpose. Also, the red pyramid, all of the casing stone is gone, and I believe that it was a victim of a series of cataclysmic events that literally blew the surface level off of the pyramid. Then we have the Serapeum at Saqqara, and in the Serapeum, which is an underground complex, we have 25 giant stone boxes. This is one of the largest. It weighs 100 tons. The lid weighs 30 tons. The box weighs 70 tons. And it, again, could not have been created by the dynastic people, so it was an inheritance. But what the Egyptian dynastic people did do is they carved the hieroglyphs that you see etched into the surface itself. Now, that is much cruder than the actual construction of the box itself, and you notice that the lid is so highly polished that these boxes would have been hermetically sealed, a perfect seal. This is where we see the detail of the very crude inscriptions done during dynastic times. You notice that the flat surfaces are highly polished, but where the hieroglyphs have been etched in, it's a much duller look. So clearly that was done after the high polish of the box. And this is inside the box. And the box has an incredible acoustic effect. If you use the sound Om, then the whole box will vibrate only to that sound or that tone itself. No other tone will cause the vibration and acoustic expansion as Om does. Then we have the famous helicopter and tank and possible submarine located at Abydos. Some people believe it's simply one inscription over top of another, but they do very, very much look like 20th or 21st century machines as we would understand them. And at the same location, we have the Ocerion. Now, some of the blocks you're looking at are made of granite and weigh 40 to 60 tons. You see cataclysmic damage. You also see later attempts at quarrying. So clearly the dynastic people discovered this underground structure, inherited it, and then utilized it for a purpose other than its original function. We also see massive tube drills such as this one. My hand is there just for size comparison. But again, tube drill technology using diamonds was not invented until the 1860s AD in the US. Also, we have evidence of flash heating of granite surfaces here, where the stone has expanded from the inside. And this has been corroborated by geologists that we take with us to Egypt. This shows you the internal structure. You see that the crystalline structure inside is larger than near the surface. So that shows us very rapid expansion of the stone that could only have been done using heat. We also see incredible weathering at places such as Karnak, where the surfaces look like they have been burnt. And we see lots of evidence of that in some of the megalithic locations, such again as here in Karnak. Some of the giant statues that we find at Luxor and Karnak. And the Christopher Dunn, who's an American machinist, did this this drawing showing how perfectly bisymmetrical some of the ancient faces of these statues are. They're supposed to be depicting Ramses II, but Ramses II simply, his people unearthed these massive statues and then rededicated them to Ramses himself. Then we have the Colossi of Memnon. This stone seated sculpture weighs 720 tons. The quarry for it is located 400 miles away in Cairo. And so how was this transported and how was it shaped using the bronze tools of the dynastic Egyptians? Another sculpture that originally weighed 1,000 tons looked like it exploded in the distant past. It's now in different pieces and was way beyond the capability of the Bronze Age dynastic Egyptians. Also, we have the underground systems of the Valley of the Queens and the Valley of the Kings. In Egypt, they all interconnect. There are a series of tunnels and causeways and shafts. They were found by the dynastic people and utilized as tombs, but not made by them. And this is further evidence of some of the underground structures and tunnel systems located in the Valley of the Queens and the Valley of the Kings. At Elephantine Island, we have this massive granite stone box or vessel or chamber or phone booth or something of some kind that looks like it was never completed, but it's a massive chunk of granite weighing probably in the region of at least 100, if not 200 tons. The unfinished obelisk at Aswan, which had it been completed, would have weighed 1,200 tons. And this clearly shows us that a very advanced culture was involved in doing this kind of work. Work suddenly stopped for some reason, and it's quite possible that it was the series of cataclysms that caused the abandonment of this and other locations. This is inside of the location where the unfinished obelisk is. And another smaller obelisk located at Aswan. You see these very strange scoop marks, which appear to be some form of advanced ancient technology being responsible for doing this work. Another site in Egypt, this is in the Nile Delta, called Tanis. And you can see that there's no vegetation at Tanis, which is very strange considering it's in a major agricultural area. This was found underground, so discovered in the 19th century by archaeologists. And on this sculpture, you see the right-hand side shows sign of heat scorching. Again, this has been corroborated by geologists we know. So that would have been a minimum of 2,000 degrees Celsius, striking this and all the other surfaces in the area. This is where the dynastic people rebuilt a wall from much larger, much more ancient stone pieces from the older megalithic time period. Here again, we see the scorching of stone surfaces. This is quartzite, which is a very hard stone. You see the discoloration. It should be that sort of light pinky white color on the left side, but you can see the discoloration caused by a blast of heat. And this is the foot of a sculpture that would have been one piece of stone. And if the foot is that big, that means the sculpture itself would have been probably 100 plus feet tall. And again, a massive piece of stone that we find at Tanis, on quartzite, this quartzite statue. And on this one as well, you see the darkening, the way that the stone is crumbling in very specific areas. And again, more of the evidence of the melting of the surface. And now we're going underground at a location called the Osiris Shaft on the Giza Plateau. And it is a series of tunnels and shafts going more than 200 feet into the bedrock. This is looking down at level 1. Then this is going down a ladder into level 2. And this is level 2 itself. And finally down into level 3. Which is filled with water. So if there's evidence as well, when I go back in October, I'm going to look for the tunnel system at the bottom that probably connects with other sites on the Giza Plateau and beyond. This is a gentleman who's actually in the water, standing on top of a quote-unquote sarcophagus weighing probably about 60 tons. And now is the site of Baalbek. This is the quarry at Baalbek. It's all limestone. And we have here a 1,000-ton block cut from the bedrock and then later recut by the Romans. This again is a megalithic ancient location that predates civilization as we know it. And this is the so-called Stone of the Pregnant Woman. We're standing there for sense of scale. It weighs 1,200 tons and is still in the quarry. And recently, next to the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, they discovered a 1,600-ton block that's still in the quarry in the bedrock. So again, something happened at Baalbek to suddenly stop construction. This gives you a more recent view of the 1,600-ton block that Susan Moore is walking around on. Another view of the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. This is the Baalbek temple itself. You see where the red lines are, 3 blocks in a row, each weighing about 1,000 tons. And another part of Baalbek, some 800-ton blocks. A more recent photograph I took at Baalbek. And this is inside the complex. These people are walking on top of an ancient megalithic wall, which again predates the Romans and any other culture we know of. More of the magnificent constructions at Baalbek. So you see the work above, you see the giant block where my wife is standing, and the work above is from the Roman times, but the work below is clearly from a much older megalithic high-tech age. We also see advanced machining examples at Baalbek in pink granite, which was moved from the Aswan Quarry in Egypt, so that's a distance of at least 1,000 kilometers. And then broken pieces of some massive columns that were originally one piece of granite stone. You see the incredible precision, tight fitting here that we also saw in Egypt and Peru and Bolivia. No mortar, no cement, no filler. And now I think we have a few more minutes, so we're now at Petra in Jordan. And Petra, again, is much, much older than what we've been taught. There are channels on the left and the right-hand side of this walk called the steep that you walk through to get to Petra. And originally they were carved in the bedrock. And then this is the famous treasury. And what you can see, apart from the very fine carvings, detailed carvings, is above at the top, you see scorching. We see lots of evidence of very intense heat scorching on the western surfaces. And this is also what we find at the other locations around the world, is that almost all of the heat scorching is on the western surfaces. So this would have likely happened at sunrise many, many, many thousands of years ago. And this is the back wall from the treasury, and those scoop marks and indentations are evidence of machining technology that was utilized to do the shaping of the surfaces. Also, there are chambers at Petra carved into the bedrock, at least 3 of them that are 300,000 cubic feet in size. This is one there. In this picture, you see one of the smaller ones. And so Petra is much bigger than what most people think. It's not simply the building called the Treasury, but indeed goes on for 7 miles or about 12 kilometers. And all of these incredible vertical surfaces cut into very hard stone, probably with a very high content of quartz crystal in it, so very difficult to shape. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these chambers cut into the hard stone bedrock as we walk through the area of Petra. They even use 2 of them for modern bathrooms, which is actually a practical thing to do. And the 3 columns on the right are original, still attached to the bedrock. The 2 on the left are repair work done probably during Roman or later times. There you see the machining surfaces or the machine surfaces on one of the original pillars. And this is inside, again, one of the chambers that is approximately 300,000 cubic feet in size. This is the Roman construction at Petra, much cruder, much smaller. And a stone staircase that goes up for about a mile. On the left-hand side is the original staircase. On the right-hand side is repair work, likely done during Roman times and later. And at the very end of Petra, we have what is called the Monastery. And again, there's a massive chamber inside of that. The people, so-called Nabateans, who are supposedly responsible for constructing Petra, did not have the technology to be able to do work on this kind of scale, let alone 7 miles of it. That shows you that goats and people still live in some of these chambers at Petra. And they were even parking modern trucks in there as well during the daytime. And here we are in Jerusalem. This is a giant stone under the Temple Mount in a tunnel that weighs somewhere in the region of 500 tons and clearly was done by a very advanced civilization prior to the time of known habitation. So I think I'm getting close to being near the end of my talk, but I just wanted to thank you very much for the opportunity to show you some parts of my explorations and show you some locations where we find megalithic works around the world. This is in Greece, this is in Italy, this is in Japan, this is Easter Island. So the history we've been taught about civilization that we know of, our history is much more advanced and much more complicated than what we've been taught. And it's time for us all to open up our minds and see that there were very advanced civilizations that existed long before our known civilizations, and that we should be very proud of our combined human heritage. And I hope all of you will have a chance at some point in time to be able to explore some of these sites and many others that I have explored. In this 45-minute window, of course, I've not been able to cover all of the places that I visited, but I wanted to give you an introduction to at least some of the ones that I've explored, and I'm definitely not finished with exploring. Of course, the recent problems in terms of travel are now starting to evaporate, so I'm going to get back on planes and visiting these and other sites in order to be able to share them with you and others as time goes on into the future. Thank you very much for your interest, and if you'd like to look up my work, it's at www.hiddenincatours.com. So this is Brien Foerster signing off from Paracas on the coast of Peru.